in the chaotic, final days of World War II, as the world teetered on the brink of a new, uncertain peace. Countless stories of survival and tragedy were written. Among them, the tale of a young woman named Elodie stands as a harrowing reminder of the brutal realities faced by civilians caught in the crossfire. Her story is not one of grand battles or strategic maneuvers, but of a quiet, personal horror that unfolded in the shadow of a crumbling empire. Elodie lived in a small village, a place that had, until then, been spared the worst of the conflict. But as the front lines shifted and the Reich began to collapse, the war arrived at her doorstep with a terrifying suddenness. Soldiers, weary and desperate, roamed the countryside. Fear was a constant companion, a heavy blanket that smothered the once peaceful rhythms of life. It was in this atmosphere of dread that a glimmer of hope appeared, a promise that would soon curdle into a nightmare. One afternoon, a patrol of soldiers entered her village. They didn't seem like the monsters from the propaganda posters. They were young, their faces smudged with dirt and exhaustion. They spoke of an evacuation, a safe zone being established far from the impending final battles. They were taking civilians, they said, women and children first, to a place of safety. For Elodie and her family, who had been living on scraps and fear, this news felt like a miracle, a chance to escape the violence that drew closer with every passing hour. The soldiers offered food, a warm smile, and a promise of sanctuary. How could they not believe them? With a small bundle of her most precious belongings, Elodie joined a group of other villagers. She looked at the soldiers, her supposed saviors, with a heart full of gratitude. They were her ticket to survival, the heroes who would lead her out of the darkness. The journey began with a sense of cautious optimism. The path they took, however, led them not towards a bustling town or a refugee camp, but deeper into the desolate, quiet woods. The cheerful chatter of the group slowly faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. The soldiers' friendly demeanor began to harden, their smiles vanishing, replaced by cold, hard stares. The chilling realization dawned on Elodie, not all at once, but in a slow creeping wave of terror. The promised safe zone was a lie. This was not a rescue. She watched as the soldiers herded them into a secluded clearing, far from any prying eyes. The mask of civility dropped completely. The hope that had blossomed in her chest just hours before was brutally extinguished, replaced by a paralyzing fear. Shock gave way to disbelief, then to the stark, undeniable truth. They were trapped. They hadn't been saved. They had been hunted. What followed was a descent into a living hell. The soldiers, who had presented themselves as protectors, revealed their true nature. The clearing became a scene of unspeakable violence. Elodie's trust was not just broken, it was weaponized against her. She was captured, and the promise of safety became a prelude to unimaginable suffering. The physical and emotional trauma inflicted upon her and the others was a brutal testament to the depths of human cruelty. Her innocence, her vulnerability, the very hope she had dared to feel all, were systematically destroyed by the men she had mistaken for saviors. It was the ultimate betrayal, a violation that went far beyond the physical. Elodie's personal tragedy was heartbreakingly not an isolated incident. Her story is a single thread in a vast, dark tapestry of suffering endured by millions of women during the war. As armies swept across Europe, the bodies of women were often treated as another battlefield. In occupied territories, from the Eastern Front to the heart of France, systematic violence was a common tool of terror and domination. The brutal actions of occupying forces left a trail of shattered lives and deep psychological wounds that would fester for generations. These were not just random acts of cruelty, but were often part of a calculated strategy to demoralize and subjugate entire populations. The silence that historically surrounded these atrocities only compounded the victims' suffering, burying their stories under layers of shame and denial. For Elodie, survival was not a moment of triumphant victory, but the beginning of a long, arduous journey. The war ended, but her personal battle was far from over. She returned to a world that was eager to forget, a world that often had no place for stories like hers. The physical scars might have faded, but the emotional and psychological wounds remained, a constant, silent presence in her life. The shame and stigma associated with what she had endured forced her and countless others into a prison of silence. They were expected to rebuild their lives and contribute to the new post-war society as if nothing had happened, carrying their immense trauma alone. Reflecting on Elodie's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable and often overlooked aspect of history. It reminds us that the casualties of war are not just counted in soldiers on the battlefield. They are also the civilians whose lives are irrevocably broken, the trust that is betrayed, and the innocence that is lost. It highlights the profound vulnerability of those caught in the maelstrom of conflict and the devastating consequences when protectors become predators. By remembering stories like Elodie's, we honor the victims and ensure that the full, unvarnished truth of the war is not forgotten. It is a somber but necessary act of remembrance, a call for empathy, and a powerful lesson on the enduring human cost of conflict. Thank you for watching. And if you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing for more deep dives into the Lucernian chapters of our history.